Good evening and welcome to the school board meeting for District 196. It is October 10th, 2022. Would you rise as I call the meeting to order and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please remain standing for a moment of silence this evening? We would like to observe a moment of silence this evening for Alyssa Schmidt, a second grade teacher at Echo Park who passed away recently. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family and with her 196 family. Thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda this evening. We're working off a revised agenda, board members. There is one item that we have to have all our board members here before we can we can approve that. And Joel and Art and Corey are not able to be with us this evening. So we're going to remove that from the consent agenda. Also on the published agenda, the community service results were listed under other action items and there's no action to take on them. So we moved them to reports. So with those two items, I'll ask for approval of the agenda as outlined.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Sechin, a second by Bianca. Look over there. So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as outlined. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That passes on a vote of 4-0. Tonight for recognitions, we'll turn it over to the superintendent for recognitions of students and staff.
Thank you. I want to start by recognizing that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, a holiday celebrated on the second Monday of October each year to honor Native American peoples, their sovereignty, culture, and gifts to North America. The day was recognized by students and staff in different ways at all of our schools across the district. We have a thriving Native American community in 196 with more than 500 Indigenous students across the district representing 55 different sovereign nations. A majority of our students are Ojibwe and Dakota Lakota. You can learn about our American Indian Education Program in District 196 in the academic section of the district website at district196.org. And the Rosemont High School Marching Band once again showed why they are one of the best in the nation this weekend with winning performances at the 2022 Youth in Music Marching Band Championships at US Bank Stadium. Rosemont finished first among Class 4A schools in the preliminary round and earned the top score of the 10 bands that advanced to the finals to be named the overall grand champion. The Eastview High School Marching Band also had top performances at the event, finishing third among Class 4A schools in the preliminary round and fifth overall in the finals. A total of 32 bands participated in the event. Later this evening, the school board will be asked to approve a resolution designating this week, October 10th to 14th, as Nutrition Services Employees Appreciation Week in District 196. There are approximately 175 full and part-time employees in nutrition services. Each year, they serve approximately 2.5 million healthy and nutritious meals at 31 locations in our district. I want to thank each of them for the important work they do to keep our students well-fed and ready to learn each day. And I also want to make a note that this year we have had so many stories of the impact that these folks have on our students because they develop relationships, they support. Sometimes they're the most important person that child encounters at school that day. So at this time, I would like to invite Nutrition Services Coordinator Spencer Fisher and any other Nutrition Services employees with us this evening to stand and be recognized. And lastly, whoopsie, wrong page. Okay. Also later this evening, the board will be asked to approve a resolution designating October 17th to the 21st as Transportation Employees Appreciation Week in District 196. We have approximately 300 transportation employees who operate the largest district-owned fleet in the state, consisting of more than 225 vehicles. In a typical year, our drivers and chaperones would travel approximately 2.9 million miles, safely transporting more than 23,000 of our students to and from school each day. And again, I want to acknowledge that our transportation employees don't just drive our kids to and from school. They also are oftentimes that person that helps that child set their day and end their day and really be engaged in learning because of that positive relationship. So at this time, I would like to invite Transportation Coordinator Karen Dayon and any other Transportation Department employees with us this evening to stand and be recognized. And while they're here, I would also like to recognize our Transportation Department on being selected to receive a $290,000 state grant to install stop-arm cameras on school buses. With this grant, we will be able to add stop-arm cameras on the remainder of our buses that do not currently have them. This grant is part of a $14.7 million project approved by the state legislature. The goal of the project is to reduce the number of school bus stop-arm violations through education and enforcement. So I'd like to end my report by showing a 5-minute video from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety that our district helped to make a few years ago.
School bus stop arms exist to protect children as they are picked up or dropped off at school or home. We'll examine requirements for vehicle drivers regarding school bus stop arm safety, how these requirements are enforced, the consequences for violations, and how you as a motorist can help keep our children safe. In Minnesota, school buses make at least 10,000 trips daily. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, children are 8 times safer riding a bus to school than any other vehicle. Their safety while getting on and off the bus is crucial. And this is why stop arms were implemented decades ago. Yet, violation of laws regarding stop arms continue to occur on a daily basis, endangering our children statewide. Every year, we hear stories of children being hit or nearly hit by vehicles not obeying the stop arm law.
It was my first stop in the afternoon. I had signaled as I turned the corner, activated my 8 ways, opened the door, the stop arm's out, the red lights are on, and the children were departing the bus.
And my son came running in the house and said that Evelyn was hit by a car.
Bus was stopped, stop arm down and everything, and as she's crossing the street, there was an oncoming vehicle. The bus driver honked the horn, yelled Evelyn's name out the window.
The car was not going to stop.
And Evelyn stopped and looked back at the bus driver and then kept going because she didn't understand what was going on.
And she hesitated just enough for the car not to fully hit her. But she did keep going a little bit and the car clipped her.
Knocked her to the ground. The rear tire ran over her foot.
I'm very grateful because if Mickey, the bus driver, did not stop her or slow her down, she would have been right in front of the car.
It's eye-opening having first-hand experience with your kid getting hit by a car by someone failing to stop at a stop arm for a bus.
It was the next day, she didn't want to ride the school bus because she didn't feel safe. So it took a while for her to get back to normal. It was very hard.
It's stories like these that reinforce the point that everyone needs to pay attention to their surroundings and always stop for school buses. The driver of a vehicle approaching a school bus displaying flashing red lights with the stop arm extended must stop at least 20 feet away from the bus. On 2-lane roadways, all traffic from both directions must stop when a school bus extends its stop arm and activates the flashing red lights. The driver must not move until the stop arm is retracted and the red lights are no longer flashing. Even if the two-lane roadway has a center turn lane, vehicles in all lanes are required to stop. A 4-lane roadway without median separation requires all vehicles traveling in both directions to stop. On a highway with 4 lanes or more, with a separating median such as a cement wall or boulevard, only traffic traveling in the same direction of the school bus is required to stop. Failure to stop is illegal, and many school buses are equipped with cameras to help identify and prosecute violators. It's important to know that violating laws regarding school bus stop arms is a serious offense. At the very least, a misdemeanor can result in a minimum $500 fine. Charges of a gross misdemeanor can result if a driver passes a stopped bus on the passenger door side or attempts to pass while a child is outside the bus or on an adjacent sidewalk. Varying degrees of felony charges can result should an injury or fatality occur. Distracted driving plays a significant role in drivers failing to yield for school buses. Minnesota is a hands-free cell phone state. That means you cannot have a phone in your hand while driving. Other distractions, such as entering GPS directions, setting a radio station, adjusting your climate control, and interacting with passengers in the car can all be distracting. Setting all distractions aside is the best way to focus 100% of your attention on the road. As a driver, it's your responsibility to know the laws regarding school bus stop arms and remain alert and patient whenever in the vicinity of a school bus or children. If possible, you may want to change your driving route or commuting schedule to avoid peak school bus activity. Make sure you know the laws regarding school bus stop arm safety on the type of roadway you are traveling. Do your part to keep Minnesota's children safe.
It's scary to think of what it could have been. And it was really close to possibly losing our daughter. And that's not something anybody should have to go through.
For more information, or if you have any questions, visit the Minnesota Department of Public Safety at dps.mn.gov.
Nice, nice. We'll move on with the next item on the agenda, and that's our consent agenda. Under consent, we have the minutes of the September 26, 2022 regular school board meeting. We have the minutes of the September 26, 2022 special school board meeting. We have gifts, advertising revenue, treasurer's report for August 2022, summary of claims for August 2022. We have revenue and expenditures report for July 2022. We have personnel exhibit. We have pay rates for substitute, temporary, and part-time employees. We have an employee agreement. We have an agreement for student teaching experience with Gustavus Adolphus College. We have the First Amendment to the SHIP School Wellness Service Contract between Dakota County and District 196. We have the second agreement to the SHIP School Wellness Service Contract between Dakota County and District 196. And we have this solar array purchase, final lease and solar as a service agreement with IDL Energies and the state of Minnesota. With that this evening, are there any items of the consent agenda board members would like to pull or have questions on? Seeing none, the wish of the board? Floor moved. Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion by Sachin and a second by Sakowden. All in favor of the consent agenda indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That passes on a 4-0 vote. We are moving on to items of report this evening. We have the official October 3rd, 2022 enrollment, and Mark Stotz is going to walk us through the enrollment.
Good evening, Chair Magnuson, Superintendent Krieger, members of the school board. This is an annual report that we provide to the school board, reporting our enrollments. Typically it's October 1st. This year October 1st fell on a weekend, and so it's the October 3rd, 2022 enrollment report. Why is this important? Well, it determines some of the funding that we receive from the state, specifically compensatory funding and other categorical type revenues that we receive. We also use this information to determine staffing allocations and budgetary allocations to each of our schools. So it does have an impact on us financially as well as operationally. Okay, so the big news for the year is that our total enrollment is 29,047. Now, keep in mind, that is the head count on October 3rd this year. We're funded based on what's called average daily memberships, which is an average of how much students attend the school district throughout the year. So if a student attends our school district for a half year, we get a 0.5 for that student. So this isn't necessarily based on, it doesn't necessarily drive what we're funded on, but it's pretty close to what our ADMs come out to throughout the year. We are actually down 39 students from last year, and we'll go through kind of the areas, elementary, secondary, and then center-based and early childhood special ed, so you can see where the numbers are at for each level. It is a decrease of 0.13%, so we still are feeling the effects of the pandemic. Our belief is not all students who are eligible to return to the district have returned to the district, and so we're watching that closely. The first question people ask me is typically, well, are they going to private schools? Are they going to charter schools? Are they homeschooling? We don't have that information right now, but we should get that within the next few weeks. So.
And that information comes to us from the state?
Yes, the state and then other sources where
Okay.
we get that information too. The one thing you're going to see is enrollment is basically, you'd say, a decrease of 39 students. We stayed even with last year. But our projections were that we were going to be growing approximately 3,000 students over the next 8 to 10 years. We aren't on pace with that growth, and so as been publicized, we do have a group that's studying our facilities needs in the district. We're definitely going to have to take this information into account and potentially revise where we thought we were going with the facility study. We think ultimately we will see that growth in the district. It just may take longer due to the pandemic. Something entirely not expected in many facets of people's lives and the economy and so forth. So, okay, so if we take out of the equation early childhood, special education, transition plus, and center-based special education, we're at 27,353 students. So it's your traditional K-12 programs that we're looking at here. That's a decrease of 202 students from last year, which is approximately 0.73%. So again, in the scheme of things, we're virtually even with last year, but down slightly. If we look at it on a district-wide basis, you can see in grades K through 5, we're down 103 students. At the middle school levels, 6 through 8, we're down approximately 119 students, and at the high school, we're up 20 students. Now, where we've seen a lot of growth is in our center-based special education, which is up 129 students, and early childhood special education, which is up 34 students. And this is just a graphical representation of going back to 2012, so 10 years worth of data. That was the elementary. This is middle school. I know it's hard to see on a screen. And then high school. Our racial demographics, we are a changing district like the state of Minnesota is and the nation as a whole. Right now we're at approximately 57% white students. Then you can see the next largest group is our black students at 14.66%, Hispanic at 11.41%, Asians 7.95%, and then American Indian, Pacific Islander, and multiracial students making up the rest. At the elementary schools, we're about 42.71 students of color. It's a little bit lower at the middle schools, 42.19, and then 42.94 at the high school. State average is 36.91 in 21-22, so we're a little bit higher than the state average. And 10 years ago in 2012-13, we were at 30.19%. So you can see as a district, we're changing. One thing I should go back to, and this is a graphical representation of that, one thing I should go back to is elementary enrollments. We saw a decrease of 214 students in our elementary grades. That is mainly due to the fact that our kindergarten enrollments came in pretty significantly under what we had anticipated. Typically, our class sizes run 2,000 to 2,500 throughout the district. Our incoming kindergarten class was only about 1,800 students. So it is lower than what we traditionally have seen, and it's certainly lower based on birth rates and housing starts and so forth than what we had been estimating. Whether or not those students return to the district at some point down the road, I guess remains to be seen. But if you look at the transition of 5th grade moving out of the elementaries and this lower than usual kindergarten class coming in, that accounts for the entire loss of students in the elementary level. If we look at grades 1 through 5, they actually increased in size. So it isn't like we're losing students as the cohorts moved from grade level to grade level. It was simply low kindergarten numbers and a larger 5th grade class moving into the middle school this year. So that's a positive sign that we actually gained students in the cohorts that were going through the elementary schools. At the middle school, it was kind of the same effect. We had a lower 6th grade class coming in and a higher 8th grade class moving to the high school. So we lost students in transition there. High school, we're pretty much, staying the same. I think we gained 20 students this year. And we know the thing is, particularly in the elementaries, we know that we have schools within the district where there's been maybe newer developments and so forth where we're overcrowded in those schools. If you look at the schools in neighborhoods where we haven't had a lot of new development, they've either held steady or went down slightly, but we're utilizing the space in those schools for early childhood programs and the growing center-based programs. So even with the loss of traditional K-12 students at those levels, our schools are still full because of the other programs that we're housing in those schools. Okay, and then this is our projected to actual comparisons. And when we talk about projected here, we're talking about what we projected for budgetary purposes. So we had projected 29,071 students for budgeting this year, and we came in at 29,047 students. It's going to change, a little bit because, again, we're funded based on ADMs, but we came in pretty close. And so we'll be revising the budget, our revenues, to reflect the 24 kids less than what we had been projecting. In the scheme of things, it's pretty darn close.
Right.
And financially, you look at it and you go, okay, that's about, $250,000. Keep in mind our general fund budget is about $450 million.
Right.
So it's a really, really small piece. So that's the good news. At least from a budgeting standpoint, we are very conservative when we budget, and we came in pretty close to that. Mm-hmm. And that is the end of the presentation. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Perfect. Are there questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, questions or comments from board members? I have a couple questions. When we look at those enrollment numbers, I think a couple things that are a plus for us, that we're nimble enough to make changes with the information, new information we're getting, whether that's facilities or budget. The 24, 26 kids aren't going to make that big of an impact on our budget, but it's certainly something that we need to keep aware of. And that we're not growing as fast as we thought we would be.
Correct.
According to Hazel's numbers. Have you circled back with Hazel? Is she finding this in other districts also?
She is, and her comment to me was, well, the first one was that she's noticed in quite a few metro districts, kindergarten numbers are lower than projected. And she's somewhat at a loss because she's trying to figure out this pandemic effect just like everybody else is. And she really doesn't have an explanation right now for that. She's really looking forward to getting our private school numbers and our homeschool numbers so she can evaluate that information. But the one thing we do know is that we are a very high district in terms of open enrollments in. So we've been really consistent. I went back and I looked at last year in comparison to the previous 10 years, and we are consistently a gain of about 1,000 students.
Okay.
Those students coming from other public districts versus those students going out. So, that bodes favorably for us because obviously students that, and I've got my finance hat on here, anytime we gain students, it's a revenue boost to us, but it also allows us to offer programming that we wouldn't be able to offer otherwise because we get those extra dollars. So, and it probably allows us the ability to not ask for quite as much when we go out for operating referendums because we do receive those additional dollars. So
It'll be interesting when Hazel looks into this further, and maybe when you get more information that is coming back in from the state, to think about our people at home redshirting their kindergartners because of the pandemic, and we saw that during the pandemic, that people are just keeping them. Now are they thinking, well, maybe it's better off, and so we've got another bunch of kids. I mean, we were losing 200 kindergartners that we thought were going to be here that aren't.
Right.
Are their parents redshirting them? And so that'll be an interesting thing to look into those numbers and see where that is coming from.
Well, even, through the pandemic, while a lot of districts were seeing sizable decreases in their student population,
Right.
we lost less than 1%.
Right.
So that, I think, is a good signal that a majority of our students chose to stay in District 196. We're hoping, that pandemic effect eventually goes back to normal. We will see that growth. We do know that there's housing developments still going on in the east and southeast part of the district, and so time will tell.
Right. And like I said, we're nimble enough to look at that information now, and some of it, we will be smarter in a year, in October, next year, October 1st, looking at those numbers. But we still know that we're overcrowded in elementary schools to do the programs that we need to do. So, but it'll be interesting when this goes back to the facilities committee, what the thoughts are around our enrollment in that.
Right. And the facilities committee is meeting again for the 20th time, I think.
Only the
this
20th
week,
time?
later this week. So we'll be reporting back to the
Right.
cabinet and board in the near future.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Bianca.
I just want to piggyback off
Yeah.
of some of what you said, Jackie, and as well as Mark. We've had Hazel come several times and present, and it's always, she's really close just about every time.
Yeah.
And I don't recall, so I apologize. Does she give us kind of a lay of the land? To me, I feel like we always get it's very specific to here, but I think I saw in the paper that 191 gained 100 kids. So they've historically had a slide, but it felt like they've maintained. And that seems to be where, if I remember correctly, we get most of our open enrolled students. will she give us a, hey, it looks like you're not getting as many from, say, 194, 191, 192?
We have that information.
Okay.
And it hasn't changed significantly over time. Yeah, the biggest area that we receive students from is 191, by far.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, good. Any other questions?
I just
go
just have a quick follow-up to what's been brought here. I think we're having a very interesting trend. And as far as the budget goes, I totally agree with you and really want to thank you that you touched that. It's kind of minimum at this point, 39. But what I'm kind of worried is when we're making decisions for the planning, purpose for facilities planning, we need to sort of look at demographics at large. Enrollment is only one part of it. It could be that what's happening as far as the residents goes. I think that's why I'm sort of interested to kind of see what is happening in the community at large for years to come. When we're planning for facilities, we're looking at new residents or new employments as new employees that will be coming down to build the facilities. What will that bring? So
Right.
I think we sort of need to be proactive to that. And when we're looking into the facilities planning, we need to look at larger demographics, what's happening. And I do not want to ask you that what's happening in the larger demographics, but it's something interesting to see. You said it will be a week from now, that probably next week that will be getting more of the why we're off on the projections
Right.
by the 3,000. We've always been close. I remember you mentioned that we've always been close years before, but this time 39 to 3,000 projection. I'm just curious to know more.
Well, that 3,000 was over a 10-year time period. So, you know, but right now, we're probably, you know, we're significantly below the projections that Hazel had provided us in terms of what we thought we were going to grow. Whether or not that picks up and we get back on track with her projections, I mean, again, only time will tell. But I agree with you, you know, trying to project out, you think about facilities, and a facility can serve the district for 50, 60, 70 years. Mm-hmm. And how do you project what the needs are going to be? You know, the interesting thing is, you know, East Lake was opened, what, 4 years ago? Mm-hmm. And nobody ever anticipated it would be over capacity that quickly. Right. So a little bit of it, you like to look out to the future and plan as best you can, but you end up being reactionary sometimes when events take place that you have no idea were coming. One being the pandemic, the second is all the development that's occurred out in that area, those types of things. So we do the best we can, and you know, so far I would say right now we are short on space. We hear it from all the buildings. And like I said, you know, if somebody my age looks at it, school looks different than when I was in school or you were in school. You know, there's more center-based programming, there's more early childhood, and we're using our buildings, we're just using them in different ways. And for programs, you know, you look at early childhood, we only serve about 7% of our 3 and 4 year old population. Some districts serve as much as 25%. We could, you know, if we expanded, if we had the capability and the physical space to accommodate more early childhood, we could take as many kids as we'd want to, because we have wait lists for those programs. So.
I was going to ask that question, so thank you for answering that. That basically, you know, because we're below projection and with the lower enrollment, does that mean we can try to achieve that higher early childhood goal faster?
And that's something the facilities committee is weighing in on, that, you know, okay, so if we have space, we don't have to build new facilities for that, but
Yeah, because I think it's 268 kids is on your wait list or something
Yep.
like that, so.
But then, you know, there's always other challenges to consider, like Okay, are we going to be able to find the people to work in those programs? Everybody knows there's labor shortages, and so there's a lot of things that play into that they're all factors that we have to consider. But up until now, we haven't had the physical facility space. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a lot of information. You've got a lot of information to share with the Facilities Task Force on their 20th meeting. And, buildings don't last forever either. I mean,
No.
This week we're celebrating Valley Middle School 50th anniversary. We always think of Eastview High School as being new. That's 25 years old.
Right.
And the lag time of building something for, a middle school, 5 years? So, it is that long-range look, but with common sense information that you've got now. So, we'll be talking about this more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on reports this evening is the community survey results. Peter Leatherman's, Morrison Leatherman is going to come up and walk us through all the information that he has gleaned out of our community.
All right, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening to go over the survey. A lot's happened since I was here 2019.
Yeah.
Lots happened.
Lots happened.
So as we go through the public opinion, it's important to note that public opinion is changing faster than ever. Okay, it used to be public opinion changed at a glacial pace, maybe once at 18 months, 2 years. Now there were points during the pandemic where I think it changed every 18 to 24 minutes. There's been stability now. What we're going to talk about in comparison is where you're at today, especially when we look at the atmospherics, and realize that in no way do you draw a straight line from where you were before the pandemic to where you were today. There were zigs and zags. It's where you ended up is what we're going to look at today, and then explore the residents' willingness to discuss further investment in facilities is how we'll wrap up the presentation. Just to review with everybody what we undertook, we spoke with 400 randomly selected residents across the district. The interviews were conducted between September 21st and October 3rd. Average interview time was 13 minutes. Non-response rate was 5.5%. The 400 samples projectable to plus or minus 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. That's the statistical caveat. A 400 sample in 196, a 400 sample in Dakota County, or a 400 sample in the state of Minnesota is plus or minus 5%. To put up some demographics for you to understand the profile of who took the survey, and the demographics are taken for two parts. First off, we can validate the information against updated census information and make sure we have a representative on these key demographics. Are we within that plus or minus 5%? But then also we can look at statistically significant differences between groups on some of these questions also. So the first set of bars looks at how long has the resident lived in the community. Median comes in at about 16 and a half years, the typical resident. 13% have been in the district for 5 years or less, while 16% have been in the district for over 30 years. So the largest chunk is right in that 10 to 20-year range at 27%. 20% indicated that they had a preschool child or an infant in the household. 33% had a child attending 196, and then 61% are empty nesters. And that doesn't imply an age. So we could have a 32-year-old without kids. It's just the lack of presence of a child. So as you go through the data with this presentation, basically 4 out of 10 people do not, or 6 out of 10 people have no children whatsoever. To Mark's point earlier, and there's a significant number of people that haven't been in a school building for a long time to be able to evaluate needs within the district. We asked the age of the respondent. The typical, the median age came in right about 47 years old. You can see 20% were 18 to 34-year-olds, while 32% were over the age of 55. 31% were community education users. We looked at the ethnicity. 63% indicated that they were white, 14% African American, 10% each Hispanic, Latino, and Asian, and then the rest were either Native American or multi or biracial included. Somebody also asked, 8% of the surveys were done in a language other than English, primarily Spanish and Somali. The financially stressed versus financially comfortable households, this has fluctuated all over the place with the pandemic. Currently in the district, you sit right about what we see across the metro area at this point in time, with 40% indicating they're financially stressed. This question doesn't ask about what their income is, it asks if how their income matches up with their expenses. Okay, and it's a 4-part statement that they're agreeing. We've seen this as high during the pandemic. The highest we got was the second shutdown, the fall of 2020. We got to about 53%, indicating they were financially stressed. 2021, it went back down. Before the pandemic, the norm was 28%. Went back down to the low 30s last year, and now this year it's continued to build. Okay, especially actually the peak this year, we got to about 45% in May. Gas prices went down, some of that financial stress came out, but now it's starting to increase again as we look at what's happening with the market. So this is very much in flux, and this is much more macro than it is micro right now. Men and women were balanced, and then you can see the geographic distribution, 34% in Apple Valley, 30% in Eagan, 20% in Rosemont, and 17% in the remaining portions of the district. Normally at this point, before I go into the data, it's just easier. Any questions on methodology, demographics before I go in? All good? All right, survey says, for the purpose, we're going to go back and look at history on some of these. And so we're looking at general atmospherics. How do people feel about the district? How do people rate the quality of education? This time around, 91% rate it favorably, 9% rate it unfavorably. Normally, a district, it's between 85 and 95% rate the quality of education favorably. What differentiates school districts in Minnesota is the excellent rating, okay, the enthusiastic rating. We don't get enthusiastic about a lot in Minnesota. So it really varies from district to district. Now, we see the trend that we've seen. This is the first signal. This is the pandemic. In 2019, in 2018, we were at 57%, 42% excellent, 31% excellent today. That's the shift that's occurred across the entire state. It's not that folks have gone unfavorable on the quality of education, they've softened their enthusiasm. They've gone from excellent to good. You have an 11-point drop. To give you an idea, the norm before the pandemic was 20% excellent, we're down to 12%. And it's a very solid 12% because every data point that comes in now talks about test scores, learning loss, and everything. So it's that they're rating it unfavorably. They are concerned, and they've gone to the softer position, the good position on the quality of education. There's only one district across the state that we've surveyed in the last 2 years that actually has more people saying excellent than before the pandemic. The typical drop is about 45% in the excellent rating. Now, what do folks like most about 196 schools? Typically, we fall into 3 what I call silos. The personnel side, the teachers, that's 18% of the sample. Then the programming, what's being taught in the schools. You can see you have 19% either indicating the variety of programming or the broad curriculum. And then it's the quality of the academics in the classroom, the high achievement, the college preparation, the high standards, the good academics. That comes in roughly at about 26, 27%. So if we look at those 3, while teachers in and of itself is in first place, it actually ties for second place. What folks are more interested in here is what's actually happening in the classroom. The quality of the academics being provided to students is what they're thinking about they like most. Now, if we ask what they like most, we normally typically ask what the most serious issue is. But hopefully we never have to ask this question again. We put this on so then I can just get an answer besides people saying the pandemic, okay? How has the district handled the pandemic? Now, I guarantee you this result would have been different at various points during the pandemic. Where you are today is 61% indicating that you've handled it excellent or good, with 22% indicating that you've handled it, yeah.
Just one quick question. As you're going through these, especially these ones that don't have any context to it, would you be able to just verbally overlay how this compares to perhaps even the state? So we can, at least I can see some reflection in terms of what does this mean compared to the larger
comparison, absolutely.
Bench line?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and in this one, this is the first one I'll go to right away when we're looking at comparisons. So on this one, we're looking at a ratio, okay? Because districts, I'll do another statement up front also. Non-parents continue to not be as engaged as they have been in the past since the pandemic, okay? They're not focused on local government, school district or cities, we've found. We've had the pandemic, we've had social justice, we had the 2020 presidential race, then we had vaccines, now we have the economy. Non-parents are not as focused. And so you have a higher number than normal saying unsure, but every district does. It's primarily a non-parent indicating I haven't been paying attention. So you have 1 in 5. If we look at a ratio, it's 63-22. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio. Okay, right now the norm is 2-to-1, taking out the unsure. So you're better than the norm of 2-to-1, favorable to unfavorable on the handling of the pandemic. Now, this isn't to say this is where you're at today. There were points of the pandemic where districts had more people saying only fair or poor than they said excellent or good, okay, where we actually had an inverse. But right now the norm is 2-to-1. You're at 3-to-1 in the handling of the pandemic 2 years after. Now, having talked about the pandemic, we then ask, is there another issue you consider to be a serious issue facing the district? Once again, this is open-ended. They can tell us anything. And so we always tell clients, you look at this and say, do you have something that hits 25-30%? 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people coalescing around a response. You don't have that. You have one issue that is a moderate concern that hits double digits, and that's the lack of funding. Everything else goes into single digits, from large class sizes, staff shortages, budget cuts, facilities needs, inflation, economy, to political, right down the list. So you don't have any major issue at the top of people's minds, okay? One other key thing on this chart is the nothing. Before the pandemic, we had about 10% that said there are no problems, it's utopia. These are the boosters in the district, okay? That's been halved. The norm now is 5% because people have found more things to be upset about over the course of the pandemic. So you have about twice as much in that reservoir of goodwill, that booster core that we typically see over the last 2 years. Now let's look at some specific school district perceptions. And these are statements that we ask folks to agree or disagree with. The first one is, does the school district spend taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? Very stable over the course of the 4 years. Currently, you're at 74% agree, 19% disagree. Norm on this right now is 58% agreement. So you compare strongly to where you were historically, and you're about 17 points higher than we typically see in 2022 on the financial, the spending of funds. Are the schools a good investment? And I would, just a good value, 9 out of 10. It's always been in that range, 90 to 96%. Do you ask for a tax increase only as a last resort? 65% this time indicate that's the case. 25% indicate that it is, or I'm sorry, 71% indicate that it is the case. 21% indicate that's not the case. That's up 7 points. The norm on this varies on how close we are to a funding request that's happened. So typically we see this in the 55 to 60% range, okay? The last statement here is a question, I call this the dipping our toes in the water of referendum. The question is, the schools are a good investment, and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. We're not saying if it's a bond referendum and if an operating levy or a tech levy. I just am curious how many people at the outset disagree with that statement. That's the core opposition. They're not willing to have a conversation. Your core opposition in 3 years has dropped from 25% to 15%. Okay, when we look at this for successful referendums, we always want that at 30% or less of core opposition. You're half that. Now that doesn't mean they're going to support anything. It simply means they're willing to have a conversation. Okay, they're not reflexively against everything. Continuing with some other perceptions on the district, does the district do a good job of involving the community? This is remarkably stable, and this is a unique response in comparison to what we've seen over the course of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the norm was about 75%. So you were about 10 points higher than the norm in 18 and 19. The pandemic caused more people to say, I don't know how to be involved. It's really hard when we're doing things virtually and everything like that. So the norm went down to 65%. Okay, yours has remained very stable over time. So whatever's been done, however you've handled the pandemic, people still feel that you've given them an adequate ability to be involved in the process. Do they trust you to do what's right? This would have varied over the course of the pandemic. Where you are today is among the top 3 that we have, with 91% indicating yes, they do trust you to do what's right. And the other one that you're very high on, and this would have wavered over the pandemic, but currently 82% agree with your decision making. 13% disagree. On this one, looking at a ratio, it's about 6.5 to 1. The norm on this is 2 to 1. Okay, and multiple districts over the course of the pandemic have had more people disagreeing with that statement than agreeing with it. Okay, so it nets out how you've handled the pandemic. The community thinks that you have done a very good job. A couple other statements that we've tested historically here. Does the district provide safe and secure learning environments? 89% agree with that. 9% disagree. It's not a statistically significant decrease. You have to be greater than 6 points on this just as a flag. But part of this, you're going to have the 2022 asterisk on this, and unfortunately it's Uvalde. And what happened. It has just heightened everything with people's feelings on safety and security and the inability to guarantee safety and security for children. What about preparing children, students for career and college? Basically unchanged. 91% agree you do a good job, 5% disagree. And then a new question coming out of the pandemic is providing the mental and emotional support for students. 76% agree that you do a good job, 14% disagree, and you can see you have 11% unsure. A new section that we added, and we just had folks agree or disagree with 4 statements surrounding diversity and equity. The first statement is leaders in School District 196 support and embrace the community's racial diversity. 77% agree, 11% disagree, 12% are unsure. I put up the strong agree versus the agree because there's not a lot of disagreement. This is an intensity feeling that people have. What about teachers and staff in districts 196 understand and respond to the cultural and emotional needs of students of color to help them achieve academic success? 76% agree, 12% disagree, 13% are unsure. School district staff reach out to families of students of color in meaningful ways and seek input on school decisions. This is 66 to 15. We're up to 20% unsure. And then District 196 teachers and staff communicate effectively with families who have a primary language other than English. 72% to 10% with 18% unsure. Really, you have very little disagreement on these statements. So it's not that there's any sort of sea change that has to happen in the minds of residents. You want to make residents feel strongly about those statements. That's the shift. It's not that you're not doing it and we're going to do it. We're doing it and we're strongly doing it, upping the enthusiasm. At the same time, you can see you net out about 15% saying they don't know, almost 1 for 1, a non-parent that just doesn't have enough information. What about job performance? This one also would have fluctuated over the course of the pandemic. Where you are today, the school board, 74 to 20, almost a 4 to 1 ratio. The norm on this right now is 55-40, about 1.5 to 1. On the administration and superintendent, 76 to 19. That's a 4 to 1 ratio. Norm on that right now is 2 to 1. Okay, so on both of them, you're higher than the norm, but it relates back especially to how people feel about handling the pandemic, the decision-making process, and the trust. All of those aspects go in. You can also see, and the districts always really had this also, I can always tell a well-functioning district when the board, the governance and the administration, the ratings go hand in hand. It's not the superintendent's up here and the board's down here or vice versa where the community sees that disconnect. It's almost a 1 for 1 on this. So the community views it as an entity, not an us versus them. Teachers continue to be loved and adored, 92 to 5. Overall assessment then of financial management. In 2019, you were at 61% favorable. This time, 72% favorable. Obviously, a statistically significant increase. At the time, the norm on this right now is at 53%. Okay, so very strong historically and to the current metropolitan area averages. Property tax sentiment. It is down. I didn't put up where you were in 2018, 2019. The chart becomes too busy. But the green bar is their perception of total taxes. The lighter green bar is their perception of school taxes. 42% indicate total taxes are high. The threshold we use to indicate that the district has a hostile tax climate is 50% in the high category. When you have a majority of people saying my taxes are high, that's a hostile tax environment. This is a tax-sensitive environment, and you were previously a hostile tax climate. You had a majority over 50% indicating they were high in the past. We've seen this now across the metro area. Less property tax hostility. Now, it will be interesting in light of the new assessments that came out this year and the property tax statements coming in November, how this lines up. But the property tax hostility has abated. If you just watch the governor's races, you don't have a lot of discussion on property taxes. There's a lot of other issues to talk about. Property taxes isn't one of them. On school taxes, if we look at that, if they do feel that their property taxes are high, this tells us that they're not blaming the school district, because you have less people saying their school taxes are high. Back in the day, I've been doing this almost 30 years, we used to ask, who do you blame? City, county, or school district. Cities and counties didn't like us asking that, so now we just ask the assessment on school taxes. This tells us that they feel they are concerned about property taxes at another level. The focus or the animus isn't focused at the district per se. This one, you are unique. If I look at the averages over the course of the pandemic. This question is simply, are the schools in ISD 196 adequately funded? You're at 37% indicating yes, 55% saying no. The norm on this right now is 60% saying yes, okay? Before the pandemic, in 2019, you were where we were at. Basically, you had 45% saying yes, 45% saying no, 10% saying I have no idea, okay? The pandemic actually caused more people to say yes because money was saved when the schools were shut down. Then you had federal government funding, and then we had state funding increases in the education formula. It drove up last fall to this question when districts were going for referendum. The norm was about 75% saying yes, they're adequately funded. It has come back down to that 60%, but you have the fewest number of people over the course of the pandemic indicating yes, the district's adequately funded at 37%. So there is a perception of need out in the community as opposed to other districts. Now, how do folks feel about the school facilities? They think they're good, okay? 89% rate the facilities favorable, 8% only fair, 3% say they're unsure, but you can see it's 2/3 indicating they're good. So any discussion on facilities, it's not that they're terrible and they need to be fixed. It's when the shifts in what's going to be invested in, how does it move the facilities from good to excellent? And the key will be, if we look back at what they like most for your district, it's going to be two factors. How is it going to impact the academics being taught in the classroom, in addition to how will it impact the curriculum and programs being offered in the schools also. Technology, we've seen this trend and it continues. The chart on the left-hand side asks folks, do they view that technology is absolutely essential, very important, somewhat important, or not too important to student learning? Okay. 2015, we would have 60% saying it was absolutely essential. Okay, it has dropped over the course of the last 7 to 8 years, and the pandemic did not change that. In fact, it continued the drive down because a lot of people are concerned that technology was going to become a replacement for classroom education coming out of distance learning. So you're typically where we are today with about 40% saying absolutely essential, 47% saying very important. And it is an important distinction because it's a have to have versus a nice to have in the minds. The key is with technology, and it continues to be, to link it back to the academics being taught and the curriculum in the classroom. Now, how do folks feel about the technology opportunities in 196? Like the buildings, they think they're good. Okay? 85% rate them favorably, but 59% say good. So it's not an enthusiastic rating, it's a good rating. But like the buildings, people feel good about where the district is with technology opportunities. What about perceptions on new housing construction? Over the past 5 years, do people think that housing construction has increased or remained the same? 62% believe it's increased. Do they expect it to increase over the next 5 years? 59% expect it to continue to increase, 28% say no, and 13% are unsure. So if we're looking at just flat majorities, a majority of the district believes that there's been an increase in the past 5 years, and they expect it to continue in the coming 5 years. What about the impact on student enrollment? 57% believe it has increased over the past 5 years, 32% indicate it's remained the same. Similarly, 59% indicate that they expect it to increase over the next 5 years, with 24% indicating they don't. So basically, you have about the same, you have about 6 in 10 people in both of these that see the historic increase in construction that they believe led to student enrollment increase, and they expect it to in the future continue. Now the split is the question, does the district have enough space to accommodate student enrollment? Okay, this is what I would classify as a statistician's nightmare survey question. 40% say no, 43% say yes, and 17% say unsure. Okay, there's just no consensus whatsoever on this question on whether the district has enough space to accommodate student enrollment. If folks heard that a property tax was going to be asked for, are they against all, are they for all, or are they persuadable? You net out this time at 1%, a +1, 24% say they're for all, 23% say they're against all. So it's actually +1. If we go back, you can go back to 2015, I put it on there for perspective for you. You actually were at -9. You had 9% more opposition at the outset than you had core support. Okay, so this doesn't mean everything's going to pass. It just, the key is going to be 52% persuadable. But you have an equal amount of core opposition and core support than you've had in the past. What would be a reasonable tax increase for a bond referendum, a facilities increase in the district? First off, only 22% said nothing, okay? We always want that to be less than 35%. This goes back to, once again, it's not saying that they're unlimited. They're willing to have a conversation. Okay, at the outset, the median comes in at about $10 a month on the average. Okay, as you start planning. Now, I always tell boards and administration, this is to set a guardrail. Okay, this isn't set in stone. It's going to depend on what's being asked for, the specifics of the request, which is why we ask this next series of questions and go through and ask, would you support a property tax increase for X? Okay? And now the key is, I always look first to the bottom number. What's the lowest level of support? You still have 61% indicating that they would support the construction of a new middle school. That's the lowest level of support. So the key on this is, I mean, we'll go through this in some districts, and we'll have 40% support, 60% opposition. You don't have anything that's a deal killer. Everything's on the table. There is a hierarchy of preference, though, that the chart shows. You have almost 80%, and the key word on this one is safety. Okay, going back to Uvalde and everything, 79% for site safety and accessibility, 78% for Rosemont High School renovation, 74% each for arts performance and elementary additions, 72% 2 new elementary schools, updated science labs 71%, 68% for support, 2/3 for renovation of core facilities, additions to middle school and high schools in the district, and activity center space. Okay, what this tells us is, if we go back to that $10 a month, there's elasticity up there, depending on the components that come forward. And I understand now the facilities plan, there's going to be a lot of discussion coming out of the enrollment numbers. And believe me, this isn't the first time I've heard this going into a school district about what's happening with enrollment, with it being in flux. But there's nothing on the table that should be taken off. Okay, it all depends on what the needs are and how they line up with the needs of the district, and then also with that fundamental question of the cost and the background. But there is elasticity, perhaps $15 up to $20, depending on what the package entails. So having read the list of improvements and then asking, do you support or oppose the list of improvements being asked, you can see an endorsement of the comprehensive look. 75% indicates support, 21% oppose. If we look at intensity, there's not a lot of intensity, about 25% feel strongly, but it's basically 2.5 to 1 strong support versus strong opposition. Really, it's an endorsement. It's a willingness to continue this discussion. You really set the parameters right in what's being discussed right now. It'll just have to line up with the needs of the district. Awareness of facts. This shouldn't be depressing. I always tell clients on this one, your universe is not 100% awareness. If you can get folks to 2/3 awareness on these facts, like I tell people, on election day, 80% of people know there's an election that day. Okay, it's not 100%. I still don't understand it after doing this 30 years. But so do folks understand that you've adjusted attendance boundaries? Half of them do. Do folks understand that there's been development in the southeast portion of the district? 48% indicates that's the case. Do they understand that the older neighborhoods have turned over to younger families? 44% are aware of these facts, and then 34% about the potential additional 3,000 students. Obviously, that number will be in flux as the reports come out. So there's room to grow in the discussion on facilities, which is interesting in the fact that it's not broad-based awareness of these facts, but you do have broad-based support for some of the solutions that we tested when we're at the 75% at 2/3 level for support for those options. Finally, communications. We have a fundamental shift that's happening across the state, across the metro area, and this is highlighted in this report also. What leads the list still is the district website. It was 21% in 2019. It's 2020. In 2022, it's 20%. The grapevine is double. Okay? The local newspaper has gone down by half. The local newspaper moved from 21 to 9%. We've seen this now across the state as local newspapers either go away or the coverage is not what it was with school districts. We have a new group that is relying on the grapevine, and it is older men, over 55-year-old non-parents. Now is a typical grapevine in addition to younger parents with children. Okay? They used to rely on the local newspaper. That was the source of information. The coverage no longer exists. Now it's the grapevine. And so it's almost a 1-for-1, the halving of the local newspaper and the doubling of the grapevine. So really it is a concern because oftentimes grapevines aren't all that friendly. But we can see in the perceptions in the district, yours isn't a poisonous one. Because people feel very strongly, very positively about from involvement to communication to financial matters. So it's just something to flag for you that we've seen this shift across the state and across the metro. So we asked folks, is your major source, minor source, or not a source at all? What's the number one source? This is like my small town in Wisconsin I grew up in. 85% are relying on friends and neighbors in the district. 44% indicate that friends and neighbors are a major source. The district newsletter is second. That's good, at 71%, with 35% major source. District website, teachers, school websites, newspapers, social media, and then television. Then finally, how do folks feel about, how informed do they feel about the decisions by the school board and administration? In 2019, 74% indicate that they felt informed. This time, 65%. People went from the somewhat informed to not too informed. The well-informed stayed the same. And that shift is primarily non-parents. Okay? They're just, like I mentioned earlier, they're just not as engaged. They're not completely checked out. It's just that difference between somewhat informed versus not well informed at all. So I think I've given you a lot of information. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so I'll let the conversation flow from your questions then.
Are there any questions from the audience? Can you come up here and give your name and ask your question? We'll see if we can get a quick answer for you. Yep.
My name is Kathy Wiebe, and the question, I just wanted to do a little clarification. If I'm correct, you said there were 400...
Can you speak into the
Okay,
microphone
I'm
so we
sorry.
can all hear you?
There were 400 households that were questioned, right? Random households that had... And 61% of them had no children in the family. You said they were...
Correct.
So when you take those numbers down, so you think, I mean, because a lot of these questions were about the school district. So if you're asking these questions, so maybe about 150 people could actually answer the questions. So that's what I would just want to confirm, about 150 people answered the questions to the survey to some extent, because the other ones really didn't have any, I mean, they don't have kids in the district, and they may have some opinions, but...
They have opinions.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so how many people actually answered the questions?
400.
Okay.
400 people went through the whole survey.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that wasn't...
And there is
Okay.
a balloon sample of parents. I didn't put it up here
Okay.
for the district, so we have a large enough cell size so we
Okay.
can look at how parents vary from the public as a whole.
Okay, because that'd be interesting to see what the difference is between people who have students in the school versus people who don't, because I think there's going to be a big difference in that.
Absolutely, there will be.
And then also, because I was just trying to read your graphics, and I couldn't see that far, but when I was seeing, you had like 27, 44, 32. So what were those numbers representing?
Percent.
Oh, percent,
Yeah.
okay. So, okay, because it'd be interesting to see that data behind those, like what is 27%? How many people were that answered that?
108
Okay, okay,
out of 400.
okay, just wanted that clarification, thank you.
Yep.
Perfect, and this is online, so you can go through and look at this online. The exhibit here tonight is online, so you can double and follow along and look at it more. There's a lot of information here. Board members, questions or comments?
I would just start by saying thank you. I mean, you know, I've been a part of many of these, so it does present a well-rounded picture. I think oftentimes the questions come after you take it all in because it is a big picture, but it really, right? I mean, you think about how many times you just think about like, hey, wow, this is kind of making sense now. But it really is helpful, especially as we have our long-term facility folks here, right? There's enough information here that will help us kind of make these good informed decisions with that as well. And also just helps us understand how important it is to keep the community engaged, especially now more than ever.
More than ever.
So that, you know, we can continue to build on much of this positive perceptions too that are towards our favor.
Right.
Thank you.
And I'd put one caveat out there, because I'm pretty sure I've been to enough board meetings to realize that you probably don't have a sense that the community overwhelmingly supports a lot of the things you've done over the last 2 years. I think that's a safe way to say it. And quite frankly, we've seen that across the state. Because who's showing up has been a lot of whatever, against whatever decision it's been. And the supporters just kind of stay at home and they don't want to end up on the Today Show. And that's a very common refrain that's happened, is that this doesn't necessarily line up with who we hear from. And it's there. I mean, the core opposition is 15% at that point in time. But it's always important that this is the whole, and to look at it at a macro level instead of the micro. But absolutely, if questions do arise, we'll write a report, and feel free to reach out with questions. It's a lot of information.
I guess I do have I don't think you can answer it today. So the last time when I remember seeing this report in 2019, the property tax increase 4 slide that shows like safety and accessibility. I'd love to see what it was the last time. I know we were going out for different things last time, but is there overlap that has increased or decreased or?
On safety?
No, not just that slide. So that slide has, I don't know, 8 or 10 items on it. Slide
24.
The property tax increased 4 different things?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it probably would be different because that was operating at the time. But we could look to see if there's any commonalities. I will point out, like I did mention safety as a concern. And you can see that you did have, I believe, 89% say you provide a safe and secure learning environment. At the same time, you have 80% willing to support a property tax increase. I mean, we're to the point now when we're talking safety that you can never be too safe. Okay, it's not that that the perception is in district after district, the district's doing a good job, I'll support more. And Uvalde, just like Newtown, Connecticut, unfortunately, has proven that's the case, and people are willing to invest in those things. But yeah, we could see if there's any sort of apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, and maybe not even, it wouldn't have to be apples to apples, but what did we ask for last time and how did it score on that slide versus what are we asking for this time and how does that score on
Sure.
here, if that makes sense?
Yep.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
As I said, this is online, so you can go back and look at it. And we've got a lot of information that we can sift through. And as I said before, we're nimble here and we can look at what our community has told us and where we need to get the biggest support, not just the support.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This evening, we have no items of old business and we have no items of new business. We'll move on to another action item this evening, and that's the collective bargaining agreement with the Dakota County Cultural Family Advocates, the DCCFA, and Tom Peterson will present.
Good evening, Chairperson Magnuson, members of the board, and Superintendent Krieger. I'll be referring to the collective bargaining agreement with the school district's Cultural Family Advocates. These employees, represented by the Dakota County Cultural Family Advocates, Local 7390, ratified the proposed working agreement on October 3rd. I'll highlight the terms of the settlement for you. Effective July 1, 2022, increase to each step on the salary schedule and the existing longevity schedule by 2.2%. Then on July 1st, 2023, increase those schedules by 2.9%. Effective July 1, 2022, add a longevity level of $500 per year for employees who have completed 10 years of service. Increase the district contributions to health insurance by 5% on July 1st, 2022, and by 4% on July 1st, 2023. Increase the 403B matching program by $20 per year, July 1st, 2022, and by $36 per year, effective July 1st, 2023. There were some other minor language modifications and clarifications. The total of the new costs during the term of this agreement are within the parameters you've established. On behalf of the administration, I recommend that you approve the collective bargaining agreement I've just summarized, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Perfect. This is an action item this evening, so before we move to questions and comments, I'll ask for a motion in a second.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Motion by Bianca, a second by Sakowden. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, board members, questions or comments? As it's laid out, we have a motion by Bianca, a second by Sakowden, to approve the collective bargaining agreement with the Dakota County Cultural Family Advocates, the DCCFA, as outlined. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That passes on a 4-0 vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll turn it over to Superintendent Krieger for the Nutrition Services Employee Appreciation Week.
Thank you. In conjunction with the National School Lunch Week, I ask your approval of the resolution declaring District 196 Food and Nutrition Services Employees Appreciation Week, October 10th through October 14th, 2022.
With that, I'll ask for a motion in a second.
Motion to approve?
Second?
A motion by Bianca, a second by Sakowden. Questions or comments from the audience? Questions or comments from board members? This is always too bad because we introduce them at the beginning, then we do this at the end, and they're all gone. So we can't say to them, congratulations, thank you for nutrition workers for starting our kids' days out in the morning and feeding them at lunch and feeding them snacks at different times, and what a tremendous job they do. And they're always, it makes me sad every once in a while, people will forward up letters, and we'll get a letter that says, the favorite person in my school is the lunch person who gives me milk every day. And I'm like, oh. So congratulations to all of them. With that, we've got a motion and a second to approve the Nutrition Service Employees Appreciation Week. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That passes on a 4-0 vote. We'll do the same with Transportation Employees Appreciation Week. We'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. In conjunction with National School Bus Safety Week, I ask your approval of the resolution declaring District 196 Transportation Employee Appreciation Week, October 17th through October 21st, 2022.
Perfect. We'll ask for a motion in a second.
So moved?
Second?
Motion by Sachin and a second by Bianca. Board, questions or comments?
I do have a quick comment. So 2 weeks ago, it's in the morning, parent fail, my third grader has a spelling test, and we completely forget about it. So in the morning, we wake up, we're having her, getting her ready, getting her breakfast, getting her stuff ready. I'm asking her all these spellings and everything. Hurry, scurry, the bus here, we're running. While I'm quizzing her on the test, Kat, the bus driver who was here earlier, looks at my frazzled face, says, what's going on? I was like, this is a test. She proceeds to take the list from me and quizzes my daughter all the way from the bus stop to her school. She ends up getting a full perfect score on her test, and we couldn't have done it without Kat, who came to save the day. Our bus drivers, our food service workers go above and beyond. This was just one example on how they help create this positive school climate that we have. So I wanted to just share that today.
That's a great story. That's the best. That's a great story. Anybody else have comments or questions? No, that's a great story, and they do lots of miles.
Indeed.
Board member, we'll come to the end of our agenda. We've got board member and superintendent updates. Board members with updates they'd like to share this evening. None? We'll turn over to the superintendent.
Okay. Each year, the Minnesota Department of Education makes available financial data for all public school districts in the state. District 196 is the state's fourth largest district. Comparable expenditure data for fiscal year 2021 shows that District 196 spent less per pupil total than the averages for school districts statewide in the metro area and among the 10 largest districts. We were lowest spending in 4 of the 10 categories of the general fund. However, in the category of regular instruction, District 196 spent approximately $379 more per pupil than the average for districts statewide, and $315 more per pupil than the average for districts in the metro area. The regular instruction average for the 10 largest districts was higher, but not as a percentage of total general fund expenditures compared to 196. And next, for a fun event this week, please join the Valley Middle School of STEM as they celebrate their 50th anniversary. On Thursday from 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock, there will be food trucks and all sorts of exciting things where they think about 50 years of Valley Middle School of STEM. And lastly, as we enter the time of year when many businesses and organizations conduct their annual giving campaigns, I would like to let people know about the District 196 Foundation. Each year, funding from the District 196 Foundation provides direct support to hundreds of our students here. Funding from the foundation provides weekend food bags, summer reading books, and instruments for students who otherwise would not have been able to participate in band. If you would like to learn more about the District 196 Foundation or make a donation to support their efforts, go to their website at www.district196foundation.org. Thank you especially to the foundation board members for the work you do and to those who generously support their efforts. And actually, you can thank them in person this Friday, October 14th, by attending the Foundation's second annual celebration event at the Minnesota Vikings Museum in Eagan. We hope to see a lot of people there, and thank you to that Foundation board for their volunteer efforts and spending all this time to make sure our kids have things to support their education.
Exactly. We should have them come and present because they have lots of interesting things that they do. Any board members with last-minute items they'd like to comment on? With that, we are to the end of our agenda, so I will ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
Motion by Sachin and a second by Bianca. All in favor of adjourning indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Good night.